morning, everyone. Welcome to this FoodSHIFT workshop this morning. My name is Sofia Parent. I'm head of local action at Sustain, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all. So just a very short introduction about Sustain. We're one of the partners in the FoodSHIFT program, which is all about generating citizen-driven innovation in 9 cities and city regions across Europe. And all these innovations respond to social and environmental challenges in our food system. So this workshop is really timely and interesting. So Sustain is one of the partners of FoodSHIFT, as I said, and we're an alliance of over 100 food and farming organizations. We're based in the UK, and we collectively work together for a fairer food and farming system. So fairer for farmers and workers in the agro-industry, because often they are underpaid, undervalued, but fairer for consumers and communities who eat their food, and fairer for the planet and nature, because they will be sustaining future generations. So with Soil Association and Food Matters, so 2 other organizations in the UK, we also run the Sustainable Food Places Network in the UK, which is a network of over 90 cities and other local areas who run place-based approaches to transforming the food system. So this is the 3rd of a series of workshops that we're organizing in FoodSHIFT, and I'll leave a quick link to the past workshops, and the best place to keep informed about any future workshops or other events of FoodSHIFT is to join our FoodSHIFT Plus discussion list. Also, I'll also post a link to how you can sign up to that list if you're not already signed up. So my colleague Callum from Food Matters is going to facilitate this participatory workshop. So Callum, on to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. Sorry for jumping in before you there. Yeah, just to echo Sophia's words there, really great to have you all here. So it's going to be a bit of a participatory session. So an opportunity really for you to hear from one another, learn from each other, a little bit of networking opportunity as well in some breakout rooms. And we're going to be focusing on this topic of innovation, but really trying to root it in some examples from across the network with what's going on, what's working, what's not, where's it come from, why is it exciting, and just really trying to see where the buzz is right now in your place, where innovation is sparking, and what's helping it to build and what's helping it to sustain. So we're going to start off with Dirk and I think Poppy as well from SusMetro, who are just going to tell us a little bit about that work. We're going to break off into some breakout rooms, just sort of 15, 20 minutes or so, where we're just going to provide a little bit of a space to talk to each other about our innovations. And then we're going to come back and have a bit of a informal chat between myself, Joanna and Charlotte, talking about their specific innovations and opening the floor to you to ask questions and to learn from them. We're going to start off with just an opening question, just to sort of get the ball rolling here. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with Menti, I'm sure you are, but we've just got one question to get this going, which is what one word describes what innovation means to you? And there's just a link there to the Menti boards. And we wanted to start off with this question, just sort of realizing that innovation is one of these sort of big terms that can mean so much to so many different people. So we thought we'd just have a bit of a grounding question just to see where we're all at and the ways in which we think about innovation in our work around food and food systems. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the board there. I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me just a second. Oh, I need host permissions, if that's okay, Stephanie. Feel free to keep filling out the board just as we sort that out. Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much. Okay. So let's see some stuff that's coming up there then. All right, so change, learning, freedom, fresh ideas, societal value, progression. already starting to capture sort of the complexity and the sort of the potential of that term innovation, when it captures so much. But lots here about this idea of something fresh, like this fresh new ideas, new processes, but also this sort of social routing we can see there, social change, societal value, freedom. Lovely. And we're going to go ahead in this workshop and just explore some of these words that we're putting on the screen here in relation to our project, and start to unpick how perhaps they add societal value and how they lead to social change. And I love this idea of creative humanity. Is anybody who popped that down want to just say a little bit more what they mean when they say creative humanity? No pressure if you don't want to, if it's too early on a Monday morning, but it's an interesting way to start. Who said creative humanity? Do you want to jump on in there? Elisa, I think that's you. Did you want to jump on in? I think you might be muted there. You okay? No, okay. That's fine. Excellent. All right. Well, does anybody else want to jump in terms of things that they've added to the board and want to talk about their ideas of innovation, just as a way of getting us started? No pressure if you want to go on into it. Okay. All right. Well, I'll stop sharing my screen there, but just to give an idea of all that sort of different groundings of this word of innovation and all of the potential there as well, in terms of the ways that we can think about it and the ways that we can use it to support and develop our work. Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to get a little bit more of a introduction to the work of SysMetro now, with Dirk and Poppy. Dirk and Poppy, are you ready to jump on in there? Right,
yes.
I'll
Thank
pass
you.
it over to you.
Thank you, Callum. Thank you, Sophia, everyone. Yeah, great to join this workshop, which is indeed timely. We've from SysMetro. SysMetro is an SME located in the south of the Netherlands, and we are participating in FoodSHIFT as innovation manager and leading on the work package addressing and accelerating innovation by 9 participating city regions. And in doing so, we've been in exchange with mainly the organizational units of these cities, the living labs, which kept us informing about the type of innovation they are supporting, and they are coordinating, and also use motivation and support facilities coming from the project to help wherever it's possible. So we are also doing this type of work in some other projects where innovation stands central, innovation along the food chain. And we have put together innovation portraits, which can be found on the FoodSHIFT webpage. So you can always consult these pages to have a more detailed look at it. Now, I'd like to share some slides when it comes to just explaining the approach on innovation. You see, yeah, that seems to be going. All right. You see this slide, I hope? Yes. We basically address innovation as composed of 4 major components, if you want so, which is a product innovation, process, social, and governance innovation. And altogether, you see centrally, it's we consider this to be system innovation, components of system innovation. And of course, innovation cannot always address all of these components. Product innovation is something which is really geared towards developing products which are new on the market, have a different composition, have maybe a different flavor, or are produced in a more sustainable way. For example, by using biomass rest streams, as we don't want to call it waste per se. And also we have process innovation, which is much more the technological side, but also food processing, but also transport and service-minded approaches. Elements like social innovation and governance are quite strong. We will look later into this, represented in the FoodSHIFT project. And they are about change of behavior, establishing new relationships, and also cultural inclusiveness, things which are not at all granted in the food system. So they get special attention here. And in terms of governance, that's obviously related to policy development, food planning, also subsidies and taxes, and labels and certificates. So all this together, going hand in hand, can ideally define something like a food system innovation approach. I just thought of sharing these slides from Ag Thunder, an agency which makes these yearly reports on investment. So this is not related to FoodSHIFT. This is just kind of a global view on where the money goes to food innovation. But I thought it's kind of telling quite an interesting story. And it's here you see the types of innovation branches which are depicted in these 5 colors. And what stands out, obviously, is in 2021, this enormous increase of innovation funding for the online restaurant and meal marketplaces, which are a result of the corona pandemic, where this got most of the funding. And I believe that the figures or the name, the title of the graph is not quite correct here, because it talks about millions, and I think it's about billions. And I wrote a note to the agency. In any case, but the graphic result as being taking the top is quite interesting. And then you see a steady increase of funding support for things like innovative food, which is dropping here as well, but for biotechnology and novel farming systems. So these two take quite an ongoing increase, and that's something which relates to some of the activities also in FoodSHIFT. So I like to point here still at this same report source from AG, some of the figures of 2022, pointing at the figures of financial support for specific company and innovation cases. And you see, for example, here in that's just on the last bit of this table, $57 million support for Protex Biosystems. That's a company which is located in the Netherlands, close by here. So kind of in this context meaningful, but they produce insects and are by now the biggest insect producer. And that means in this case, 10,000 tons of proteins per hectare in their 15,000 square meter facility, Protex. And interesting, I mention this because sometimes, you know, these big, whether it's Oatly or whether it's some of the other big players, sometimes they come across like just another industry player. And lo and behold, Protex is located close to Tesla in this case. So they all look the same. They all have this type of huge factory-style facilities, which are not at all what we sometimes, you know, envision when we think about a new food system. But interestingly enough, also this person started with a dream, and in 2009, I believe, yeah, it says here, when diving, he kind of came across, you know, a depletion of ocean wildlife, aquatic life, started thinking about it and realized that it had to do lots with waste which went into the waters and the disappearance of the natural environment. So all this got him going, and he ended up creating that company. And in FoodSHIFT, we do have, not at the same scale, but definitely with the same ambition and compassion, we have a grain, our grain, maybe I should say, you know, led by Karin Bökel, who is basically upcycling spent grains from beer, whiskey, and oat milk to produce new products and fiber-rich flours, crisps, granola, and more. So this is an example where also on the production side, on the technology side, and these basically new products based on in terms of with the ambition of reducing food waste takes quite a strong role. But we in FoodSHIFT have a wide range of other aspects, and I would like to hand on to Poppy Eire, who is coordinating lots of these activities with the different types of players and living labs, to explain a little bit what we are experiencing in FoodSHIFT on that side.
All right, thank you, Dirk. So yeah, as you can see from this graph above, we refer again to these dimensions of innovation, so social, process, governance, and product. The reason I'm showing you this is because the two examples that Dirk has just given, they might seem quite, large scale, they might seem very high tech, high investment, this kind of innovation. But actually what we see in FoodSHIFT quite often is that it's really the opposite. It's low-tech, community-oriented solutions that are really the ones that are active in the food system. And we can see that reflected here, for example, with these social innovations and the process innovations. And you can see quite clearly that actually we have very few product and governance innovations in FoodSHIFT at the moment. But what I do want to point out here is that a lot of the innovations are not relevant to only one dimension. For example, we often see that a social innovation is also targeting some governance aspects, or a product innovation is also looking at the technology behind their product, so it's also a process innovation. So this is something to keep in mind, that food system innovations are actually, very adaptive. They're very community oriented, and they're very, very well adapted to their local circumstances. So this is something to really keep in mind, that when we talk about innovation, it's not just big scale, high investment, high tech innovation. It can be really local and small scale, but it can have a really high impact still. Can I have the next slide, please, Dirk? Yeah. So within FoodSHIFT, we've had a really amazing opportunity to capture a lot of different innovations, and we've done that in the form of the innovation portraits. Perhaps one of the Sustain team members can share the link in the chat at some point. But essentially what we've done is, in our 9 city regions that we work with in FoodSHIFT, we've captured lots of different food system innovations, around 10 per city, but of course there are hundreds more, but there are a selection that we've picked out in each city that we can work with, and we can help to accelerate their innovation. Now, as part of the research to identify these innovations and to really understand them, we conducted something called a MICRA interview. MICRA stands for Motivation, Implementation, Challenges, and Ambitions. And the idea was to really speak with the people that are setting up these innovations, that are running them, and to understand why they're doing it, and then to also be able to understand what they need. And it's really in identifying the needs of these innovators. That's where we can assist, and that's where we can really say, okay, this is the expertise that we are able to offer as a project or as a facilitator, and this is how we can support you. So that's something that has been really essential in this process, is understanding the fundamental needs of the innovators, and also understanding that they can change on a daily basis. So this is something that really happens in the food system. It's a very dynamic environment, and these needs can change quite often. And we really saw that in the COVID pandemic, that these changed overnight. So this is something to keep in mind when you're working in the food system, not to be afraid of this dynamic nature. And sometimes it is, surprising what can happen in such a short period of time, but it is something that you need to work with and to be flexible with. Next slide, please, Dirk.
Yeah, see, just doesn't want to. Let me take this one. Yeah.
Yeah, super. So just to put things in perspective a bit in terms of, okay, what needs to be in place for innovation? What does innovation entail? I think we can talk about 3 main steps here. And I think these will also come up later in today's workshop. And that's spark, sustain, and build. So these are 3 things that we've noticed are essential in innovation, and especially in the food system. Starting with spark, and I think that's quite self-explanatory, that requires passion, and that requires dedicated people. And later in this workshop, I think we'll also hear from 2 FoodSHIFT innovators who really embody this passion and dedication. So that's number 1. It sounds easier than it is, but I think we're very lucky in that many food systems have lots of dedicated people and lots of people that are passionate. We just need to find them, and we need to ensure that they are supported to do what they aim to do in the food system. Second, we have sustain. This is quite a broad topic, but just to highlight one thing that we've really noticed is important, that is this willingness to adapt and be flexible. Because it might be you have someone that's very dedicated and very passionate and really wants to implement their innovation, but of course they also have to be willing to adapt to the changing circumstances of the food system. And this might also mean shifting the vision of their innovation slightly to work in the food system. So that's something to keep in mind, that really ensuring that you're working with the dynamics of the food system and willing to change your vision and to adapt to the circumstances is really essential in the food system. Another one that is, yeah, I would say just as important is also being willing to integrate with the rest of the network. Other people that are working on innovations in the food system. Look who's around you, who's in your city, who can you collaborate with, who can you find partners with. This is also a really important thing to keep in mind in order to sustain your innovation on the long term. And finally, we have build. So when we talk about building an innovation, we might immediately jump to something like upscaling, thinking, how can I make more impact? How can I scale? How can I get bigger? How can I have more market and this kind of thing? And while that is a great ambition, it's also really, I think, important to keep in mind that there are different ways to keep building an innovation that's not necessarily just about getting bigger. You have different kinds of scaling. You have outscaling, you have deep scaling, you have upscaling. We actually have a resource on this from FoodSHIFT that I will pop in the chat shortly that explains these different methods. But something to keep in mind that bigger is maybe not always better, and that a lot of innovations are designed to work on a small scale and to work in a highly adapted way in the local community. So this is something to think about if you have an innovation, to think, okay, if I want to make more impact, is it that I need to get bigger? Is it that I need to scale? Or is it perhaps that I need to adapt some things within the way I'm working now? Or, for example, think, okay, maybe I can have impact on policy level as well. So I would like to join a working group on policy, and I can give my input to a new food system in that way. So there's different things to consider here, and it's important to, in some ways, think out of the box. And I think many innovators are already doing that. But yeah, when we're looking at scaling and building and generating more impact, just be aware that bigger is not always better. It is definitely great, but be aware that there are other options and other ways to create impact and create systemic change. So yeah, I think that's it from us. And the innovation portrait link is in the chat. And I'll also send another link in there about building innovations and accelerating upscaling, just for some more context. So yeah, thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of the workshop.
Great, thanks Poppy, and thanks Dirk. Really interesting, really exciting to hear the energy that's this sort of low-tech community-oriented approach to innovation and how that's sort of dominating right now, what you're seeing. Just a couple of points that I wanted to pick up on before I go to the floor for any questions. You talk about a lot of your work being supporting sort of why these innovations are doing the work they're doing and helping to identify some of their needs. Is there any common threads that you can talk about, maybe specifically around the needs that you found are quite common across these innovators that you're working with? Either to Poppy or Dirk, if that's whoever's best placed.
Funding always comes up, always. That is always a big one. But actually what we notice a lot is there are a lot of governance barriers in some cases. Or it might be, for example, in very small scale innovations that, for example, they don't know which legal format they should choose. As an organization, it's like, okay, are we a cooperative? Are we a commercial business? There's a lot of governance obstacles for many innovators because, yeah, I would say the governance policies in many cases are very conventional. They're not really, looking at innovation in the way we're looking at innovation. So sometimes we find that innovators don't know where they fit in terms of legalities or governance aspects. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, I think the only way we can address that is to really be proactive in bringing that to policymakers and saying, hey, this is something that we're facing, and seeing, are there ways to work around that and to make sure that this kind of innovation has a place in governance.
And do you find policymakers quite responsive to that kind of feedback?
Dirk, perhaps you have a better eye on that.
Well, I mean, it's obvious that over a time period of 3 to 4 years, that has a certain influence on the process, because I think it had various occasions where we felt it had strengthened the position of these living labs and of the actors in these cities by just having kind of continuous support and visibility for these items. People see there is comparison across the borders to other countries, similar occasions, actions taken by other governance, which kind of creates some kind of competition and some types of sometimes embarrassment if nothing had been done. So I think it's really of great value that there is this type of showcase element And exactly, the cities are very ambitious in becoming better and taking the lead. So all this has led, I think, speaking about the Spark, which also kind of went to the cities and had a lot to do with the interaction and communications which we offer. For example, one maybe interesting element I was trying to mention before is offering information on the impacts of food consumption or waste, whatever, on the whole system and on the environment is something which is often highly valued. So we developed this ecological footprint tool where cities can look at what the impact actually is on the direct environment of the city, how much land is needed to produce, for example, all the meat that is being consumed. And this becomes quite graphic, quite bold in the severeness of that impact, which is something which is not always at your fingertips. And this is something we kind of realize is in teaching or in certain discussions with the governance and the local politicians can become very helpful and illustrative. So there also the project in its terms of science and database approach could provide some input.
Excellent. Thanks, Dirk and Poppy. Just a couple of questions in the chat. One I think has already been answered, but I'll read out anyway from Eliza, just asking to repeat the acronym for the interview technique. So that's micro, motivation, implementation, challenges, ambitions. And there's one other question. I think this was referring to when you had your the graph up, Dirk. It's from Joanna. It's asking, is that only for public funding or are private programs, foundations and investments included? Joanna, do you want to just give a little bit more context to that?
I think you, you mentioned all the important points, or let me know if the question is not clear enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, this is, let me see. I would need to check myself, quite frankly, but it is public funding in any case. I think it's public funding mainly, but I would need to see the references myself. I can put the reference to this report into the chat in a moment.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a clarification from Poppy there. This is, I think, referring to the acronym. Is that right, Poppy? So implementation referring to the activities that the innovator is implementing at the core of their solution, aka what they're doing. Thanks, Poppy. Okay, so any questions now for Poppy and Dirk at all? Does anybody want to jump on in? I can't see all of your faces, so I don't know if Sophia and Stephanie are able to keep an eye on that. Does anybody want to jump in and ask a question for Poppy or Dirk? Any questions there? Sophia, Stephanie, I can't see if there's no worries. There'll be plenty of time for more questions later when we go into the conversation with our guests. So the next part really is an opportunity for you to start to be able to talk to each other about some of the things that you're hearing, but also your own experiences. So what we're going to do now is just have a bit of a participatory activity. So we're going to break down into breakout rooms, and we're just going to have an opportunity to talk to each other now. And we're going to go back to this idea of what helps us spark an innovation, what helps us sustain that innovation, and then what helps to build that innovation moving forwards. I'm just going to pop those questions into the chat there. So in these breakout rooms, with the groups that you're in, considering the place that you work, considering your environment, maybe you work directly in an innovation, an enterprise or a startup, or perhaps you work in a local authority, and you're involved in supporting or helping to create an environment that's suitable for innovation to spark. Wherever it might be, think about your role, think about the ways in which you can help spark innovation or the ways in which your innovation was sparked, and then have an opportunity to talk about how you can sustain that, whether that's through sort of institutions or through working together as in sort of society, and how that might be then scaled up and multiplied. So I'm going to pass over to Stephanie or Sophia now to help us break down into breakout rooms. Are you able to run that for us?
Yep, I'm going to split us into rooms now.
Thanks, Sophia. I hope you enjoyed the breakout sessions. Certainly some really interesting conversations going on in the room I was in with Johanna and Alex. Just an opportunity now to feedback a little bit from those sessions. So maybe some things that you've learned from the discussion, either about somebody else's place or something that you've taken away about the work that you're doing, and just some reflections there in terms of things that maybe have inspired you or challenged you things that you might look at differently because of those conversations. Does anybody want to jump in and just give a little bit of feedback from your breakout group?
Yeah, I'll go.
Thanks, Alex.
I thought it was really interesting hearing about Johanna's work at the Superco in Berlin. And despite sort of economic challenges that are being faced at the moment, there's still sort of a demand for this shift to sort of more sustainably produced food and cooperative ways of sort of providing food to communities. It's quite easy to get bogged down in all of the news and the media, but when you sort of speak to people who are working at that sort of level, it's just really nice and refreshing to hear that there's sort of still a demand for good food and that people want it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, you want to just introduce to the group quickly what your innovation is as well?
Yeah, of course. So it's called 50 Ways to Cook at the moment. I am based in Bristol in the UK, and we are setting up a little sort of box scheme, which we are in conversations with getting it into universities and local schools to help young people grow their own food at home, to sort of improve local level food insecurity within Bristol. So people will be able to grow their own herbs and stuff on their windowsill, radishes, small, easy veg to grow. And just sort of get them reconnected with growing food, and also providing little educational points within leaflets in the kits, and hopefully down the line to start running some workshops with local groups, communities to engage them within one of our urban farms within the city. So yeah, it's a great city for sustainable food.
Great stuff. Yeah, in our room we had Johanna from Berlin, me from Brighton, and Alex from Bristol. So it's quite a cool collection of food cities going on there. Okay, anybody else want to jump in and talk a little bit about some feedback from your breakout rooms? Maybe something that you've learned or something you reflected on in terms of your own work. I can't see you all there, so feel free just to jump on in if you've got questions at all.
I can jump in if that's okay. So we were in a group talking about actually the role of innovation in food strategies became a bit of a focus, and thinking about how we can engage with partners of all different levels. And I think Lauren was talking about experiences in Peterborough around sort of big global companies, and how to sort of engage them in a meaningful way, which gets them to understand what the issues are, I think, and sort of how innovation could provide that scaffolding support within a food strategy. And we also talked quite a bit about Copenhagen and all of the really interesting things that are happening there. And yeah, there was a little group of us there with lots of interest in what's going on over in Denmark. Hopefully that summarises a little bit. Do feel free to jump in, anybody else from our group.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sophie. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Is that
Yeah,
Derek?
pretty much. I think was a really good point at the crucial difference between the transformative role and the conservative role of innovation. I think it was Lauren who kind of, but correct me if I'm wrong now, but who brought this up. And conservative role of innovation is playing often also in the funding quite a strong role. If you look at this, certainly in the production scheme, it's all about efficiency, resource efficiency. So any kind of new engine, using less energy is kind of heralded as kind of the most amazing innovation for sustainability. But in fact, it is just kind of paving the way for more of the same. And the transformative innovation, which really makes things different and out of the box thinking and new ways, new partners and different products, is the one which is ultimately more promising when changing the food system. So that's something which eventually also something could be addressed in a strategy, because it's difficult to build in innovation concretely into strategies. But I mean, monitoring innovation or expressing preferences for which type of innovation is certainly something you can put into a strategy.
Thanks, Derek. I see Florence, you've got your hand up. Do you want to jump on in there?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to thank you very much, Dirk, for doing that. But what I think is also very interesting is that a lot of innovation we will actually get from practice. So I think there has been a lot of push for evidence-based practice in the past, which was driven very much by technological research or academic research that was aiming at finding a standard solution to then apply somewhere else. And I think if we want to really find innovation, it's going to be complex. And it's by learning what seems to be working on the ground and seeing how to help them through, which was already brought up in the plenary previously. This is where we really can start finding promising innovation. It's working with the field, which up to now we may not have really been interested in. Over.
Thanks, Florence. Dirk, did you want to come back on that at all?
No, I mean, I think it speaks for itself. A good point. I mean, that differentiation remark was made by Florence. So yeah, no, good points.
I see that Isabel, you popped in the chat about calling for people to contact you around any kind of institutional support that they need in terms of grassroots and individuals doing transformative work. Did you want to just add to that at all?
Yeah, so in the group I was in, we heard from about some of the different types of innovative work that people are involved in at the moment, but then there was also some kind of frustration at the challenges of grassroots organizations trying to innovate when, you know, they're dealing with the reality of really high levels of need and kind of struggling to keep up and things like that. So we were talking a bit about some of the good work that's already going on, but also about what kind of support would actually be useful to grassroots organizations to be able to have the space to innovate and do transformative things. So things that came up were kind of obviously funding support, but also support with governance and technical aspects, like, you know, even things like understanding food safety regulations and that sort of thing, admin support, and actually getting enough people power to be able to try things out.
Great, thanks, Isabel. Does anybody have any experience that they can talk to in terms of maybe an example where they have received institutional support that's helped progress their innovation, or perhaps an example of where they haven't and where that's been a key barrier to any success? Anybody have any thoughts or reflections on how institutional support has impacted your work? Sarah, do you want to jump in there?
Sure. Hi. I think I don't know if this is going to be a success or not, because it's something that recently very much came up where I'm working. So I work for Coventry City Council, and recently we had someone from the public health team see a project that was, I think, done in Bristol, where migrant centers or hotels where migrants are waiting for their documentation, they set up a community growing center, or just places that they can grow food that are from regions that they're from, or anything that they've brought with them, or just a place for them to not have to sit in a hotel the whole day, pretty much. And where there was just an idea, they just really did not know where to go from it. So I think institutional support came from how different departments of the council were able to come together. So we had the migrations team, public health, and we had planning, and we had the sustainability team where I work, all coming together and kind of come up with a plan of how you can make a vision, kind of idealize a vision. But of course, I think there were ways that this could be done without, I'm thinking very much from a council perspective, because that's where the idea came in. But I'm sure there, you know, it could have been, if they went to an allotment society, for example, that could have been tackled in a different way. But I think each I think the institutional support kind of varies which institution you're talking about. But one thing that I've seen from, like, I've only worked at the council for a year, but is that it makes it so much easier when different departments are transparent with each other, or when there is communication between all of them, because the reason public health came to us is because they've been trying to do the whole thing by themselves, but we're getting stuck at the planning society, like at the urban planning section. They were getting stuck at which plants should they grow, or and information at that. They were stuck at the migrations part because they didn't know where people were living. So when there was one conversation with all the departments that just kind of jump-started the process. So I think partnership really makes a world of a difference. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Sarah. And it's a really key innovation, isn't it? Certainly at all levels of government, but to sort of join up this very disconnected approach to food and food policy. Is there any, how is that driven in your context, in your local authority? Where did that drive to connect up and communicate and be more transparent come from? Do you know at all?
I think a lot of that came with how, so we've recently drafted the new food strategy for the city, and the head of climate change, he was very insistent that it isn't the climate change team's strategy, that it becomes kind of the entire department strategy. So there were a lot of consultations with every department to kind of see what support do you need, where do you think you're lacking, what do you think the main priorities are, and kind of including everyone in that conversation makes it quite part of everybody's agenda, instead of this is what the climate change team should be doing. It still is kind of like that. It's harder to do than to say, pretty much. We're seeing steps there, because like this, I think, is a pretty good example where we're getting more inquiries as a team, but it still kind of feels like, okay, we give you the idea and you kind of set that out, but we're a team of like 6, so that doesn't really help much.
That's great, Sarah. Yeah, and certainly it's from our experience on our network, the Sustainable Food Places Network. It is interesting to see local authorities becoming more nimble, becoming more dynamic in the ways that you're working. And I know it's challenging because there's some sort of silos to break down there, but great to hear that's happening in your context. Any other comments and reflections on our breakout groups or any of the other points that have been raised since? Okay, excellent. In that case, let's go ahead and introduce our 2 innovators who are going to tell us more about their work. We've got 2 very exciting speakers with us today. We've got Charlotte from Local and Bocal in Avignon, who are an organic artisanal cannery based in Avignon, who produce a range of soups and composts and spreads, heavily based on what they can access from food waste in the area. And then we've got Joanna, who we've already heard a bit from the Super Co-op in Berlin, it's not a supermarket, but it's a new movement of co-op and governed by members, co-designed through democratic governance that aims to empower members through the ways that it goes through its innovation and its governance processes. Let's hand over to Charlotte now from Local and Bocal. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your innovation, where it came from, and what's sort of driving you at the moment? Charlotte, over to you.
Hello, if you don't mind, I will share my screen.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, go ahead.
If it works.
It should work for you now, Charlotte.
Okay.
Try again.
Yeah. Perfect. Do you see it? Yeah.
Yes.
So very nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very sorry I haven't spoken English for years, so sorry for that. So I'm running a company which I created 8 years ago. So we are a private company, but we are supported by public funds sometimes. We can talk about it later. Our goal is to fight against food waste. We buy to local farmers all the vegetables they can't sell in the normal markets, because the vegetables are too big, too small, a little bit misshapen, or sometimes too ripe. to be sold on the gross market. Or sometimes they are just in overproduction, you know, when the tomatoes are growing, the market is full, and they don't know what to do with these tomatoes. So they throw them away for most of it. I can give you an example of carrot producer. Throw 3 tons of carrots a year. It's huge. Organic food only. We only work for organic food. So we buy these vegetables. We buy them half of the gross market price, more or less. And we cook them, and we cook soups. We cook compotes, spreads, cooked vegetables, sauce, tomato sauce, which we sell in the markets. Sorry. This is our products. On the left side, this is our trademark, which are sold in organic food, in organic shops in the south of France mainly. But we also work for bigger companies like Monoprix or La Vie Claire, which are national groups in France. So we cook for them with the vegetables which are not sold by producers. So that's how we do. We buy the producer, we buy the vegetables. So this demands a lot of work because the vegetables are not in the standard. So we need to sort them by hand. We wash them. We take out the part which are not proper for consumption. So this demands a lot of people to work in. So this is important because it thanks to that we can create more jobs and employment. So one of our commitments now is to be an integration company. It means that in the company we hire 3 people who are very far from employment for social reasons. Maybe I don't know, we have some refugees working in, we have people who have mobility problems, who have language problems, who have I don't know, sometimes young ladies with children who have difficulties to go to work for that, or people who have been unemployed for a long time because they were sick or for family problems. For them, it's very, very hard to go back to work. So we hire them and we offer them a job to cook our products. So for that, we are helped by the government. In France, there are fundings for integration of people far from job. So we have, it's around 11,000 euros a year per person of help. What can I say? So I'm sorry, it was a little bit not in the good. So we have lots of commitments in local and vocal. The first one is the food waste. The second one is social, and then we have also a high implication in society because we are part of many works around environment, around the organic food, around social implication, and also being a woman is very important for me. And I often go in schools, for example, to talk about the gender equity. So we are a private company, but we have a social aim, and to me, it's very important to show that you can be a profitable private company, not that profitable, but anyway, and to have a real social and environmental commitments. To me, it's very important to show that. So one of our main issue is profitability, really, because we are a normal company and we have to deal with that, but still we can have a heavy commitment. So So I'm very proud to show that it's possible, and it's one of the, it can be part of a solution for sustainable food. So it was a. If you have any question, I will be very pleased to answer.
Charlotte, thank you very much, and thank you for speaking English for us. It's a tall ask coming along on a Monday morning and having to speak a second language. So thank you very much for doing that. Sounds wonderful what you're doing. I think we're going to delve into questions. We're going to do questions in a short while. I'm going to hand over first to Johanna just to tell us some more about the cooperative supermarket that she's involved in, and then we'll go on to some questions after that, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay, great stuff. Over to you, Johanna.
Yeah, thank you also for sharing, Charlotte. It's very amazing what you do. Very inspiring to see that. Yeah, so we are running a cooperative supermarket, which means that all of the shoppers in our supermarket are also co-owners of the supermarket and also co-workers. So every member works for 3 hours every 4 weeks at the cashier with restocking the goods, but also in other working groups around accounting or finding new members, very different activities. And with this co-work approach, we can have a lower margin on the food that we sell. So the whole goal of the cooperative supermarket is also to make good, sustainable food options more affordable, because we still see that there's a big gap between people that actually want to buy more sustainable food and people who actually do it because they have the they know that they can afford it and they have access to it. So that's our goal on the consumer and on the member side, to make good food more accessible and foster sustainable consumption choices. Because also there is this really different connection you have to food when you deal with it 3 hours every 4 weeks, right? So you understand how a supermarket works, you understand why the cucumbers look how they look like, you know, you understand what happens to the bread when the day is over and why it maybe makes sense that the bread shelf is not full until the very end of the day. So you just understand how this whole system works, which is, I think, very helpful for this food connection. And then on the we have the second side, which is then more on the producers side. So we try and work directly with producers. So for example, for fruits and vegetables, but also for some other goods from the region, like juices or bread. And with that, we also try and be like an additional sales channel, because for farmers, at least in Germany, it's often like a challenge. Either they need to work with the big supermarket chains, and of course they have a lot of market power, and therefore they really decide about the prices. So it's very hard to work in a good, fair, and also like have time for growing your vegetables in a way that fosters biodiversity, for example, when you get this very like high price pressure. And the alternative is that farmers sell products directly themselves, which of course involves also a lot of marketing work, and not everyone is able to do that additionally to the work on the field. So yeah, we also try on this side to be like an additional sales channel for the producers we work with. So yeah, these are kind of the both sides that we try to improve with our approach. And I think also the empowerment of society is pretty important. Like everyone should be able to become a member, is invited to become a member of our cooperative. And then with like these 3 hours per month that you support, you are really making a difference. And you're really a co-owner of a supermarket. And we show that when we're not satisfied with our food system, that we as citizens, as neighbors, we can come together and build a real alternative for us that works in a way that we kind of wanted to work, and where we have the full transparency because we own it. So yeah, we're still facing a lot of challenges, like growing to like an extent where we're also financially sustainable, and also getting more people on board that are maybe not that into sustainable food already, but maybe deal with it more because they join Super Co-op. But yeah, and yes, maybe to the chat, thanks for sharing. La Louve was a big inspiration for us. So 2 of the Super Co-op co-founders are from France, and 1 is from the US, and also we're inspired from like a co-op in New York and in Brooklyn, the Park Slope Food Co-op, and La Louve in Paris, and they're both way bigger and kind of like our role models. And in our little breakout, we already talked a little bit about like how important it is to then check out which solutions already work in other countries and then adapt them to your own local context, which can actually also be innovation, doing something that already exists and adapting it instead of doing something completely new.
Thanks, Johanna. Yeah, obviously I was in the breakout room with you before. We just started touching on this a little bit, but I held you back because I wanted you to share that learning with the group. This idea of transferring one innovation from one place to another, from one country to another, obviously very inspired by what was going on in New York, very inspired by what was going on in Paris. What have been some of those sort of key challenges and successes that you've had with taking that innovation from one place and trying to introduce it to Berlin?
Yeah, I think what works very well is adapting like this community approach or kind of transferring it. So I think we're learning a lot on the side of community management and how to organize a supermarket with a lot of volunteers and neighbors from the other co-ops. Like, so for example, we transferred kind of one-to-one a lot of these rules around the community organization, the 3 hours every 4 weeks. That's exactly the same in New York and Paris and Belgium and for us, because there's just a lot of learnings over the years. The food co-op in New York exists over 45 years now. So it's a long time of building experiences and a lot to learn on that side. Where it's a bit different and where more adaptation work is needed, what we talked a little bit about is like first this cultural like feeling around food, where just in France people are more willing to spend money for food, for example, because it has like a higher cultural value than in Germany, and as I heard from Alex, maybe also in the UK. And also different is of course like this whole logistical side, and that's even different in different cities in Germany. So even like we can't say we transfer to Germany, but really like to this local setting in Berlin, because around Berlin there it's not like all farms are a bit more like they're further away, just because the city is big, and then till you get to the farms you always have like some distances. And more in the south of Germany, where also another cooperative supermarket exists in Munich, it's also really great how they developed and how fast they set it up. There you have a bit more like smaller local farms in the area that is maybe a bit more reachable. So from this like logistical supply side, I think there are also many differences that you can transfer, but then from this community organization side, there was a lot to be learned from the others.
Gianna, it's very helpful. Charlotte, just to bring it back to you, you talk about that challenge between making something that is providing social value as well as being profitable, a challenging thing to do. Are there any things that you've found that have been successful in helping you balance those two things? You talked a little bit about the institutional support in terms of accessing funds to have employees. Are there any other successes and tips that you can pass on to the group?
The first tips will be to prepare and to study very well the project before going, because in food processing, every material costs a lot. You can buy a car with our cooking pot. So the sizing of the project is very, very important. So you need to study your market, of course, the availability of vegetables locally. If you want to cook locally with seasoned vegetables, you have to know perfectly what are the vegetables available locally and what are the seasons. And then I created recipes which are following the seasons. For example, I will never cook something with tomato and pumpkin in the same recipe, because you have a summer vegetable with a fall or winter vegetable. So it's really important to prepare all that before going, to know very well who can help. So we are talking about institutional support. There are many in France, but it's hard to obtain. It demands a lot of time, and once you have started, you are working, you are cooking, and so it's very hard to take the time to address all the documents you have to address. that's a difficulty. But being a company with real commitments for social and environmental aims helps to get institutional support, because of course the policies now, I mean, if you show that you are creating employment, for people who are far from employment, fighting for against food waste, etc., the government will easily give you money, more than if you are a normal company. So that helps too.
Great. Thanks, Charlotte. We're going to open up to the floor in just a second, but just one more question for Johanna. I noticed whilst doing a little bit of research for this, I see that you're over 1,000 members now in your cooperative supermarket. And you talked a little bit about the model and how donate a bit of their time to being a part of the co-op. How is the scale aspect of things working for you now? 1,000 members, obviously that's a lot of people's time. Are you able to use that time? How are you dealing with that size? And is the plan to carry on getting bigger, or are you comfortable with where you are now?
Yeah, definitely good question. So of course we started very small, like with 40 people running a super small food co-op in a 20 square meter location, and then we kind of scaled up step by step. Now we have around 700 square meters selling surface, and 350 of that is selling surface, where we sell around 3,000 different products. So the goal is still to grow the assortment. So really having it very similar to the examples in New York and Paris and Belgium, where you have a full assortment, because when you contribute 3 hours per month to your own supermarket, ideally you get everything you need there. So that was from the beginning on a very important point for us, which also meant that we are kind of bigger right now in terms of surface than what we actually would need with the current amount of members. So we will have around 1,200 members in total, but 860 of them are really active. So they're kind of doing a shift, and they also come to shop, because only as an active member you're allowed to shop, plus one co-shopper that every member can name. So we still need to be bigger in terms of the number of members to be financially sustainable. And I think that's the first goal of scaling up. So we don't want to grow to just grow, but we first want to grow to be financially sustainable. As Charlotte, you also said, like we're a business, so we need to sustain ourselves financially. We don't get any like additional state funding for now. And then of course we want to scale because we want to grow our impact. But then it's a bit the question, like, is it us that need to do it, or is it then also other organizations that can be in other parts of the city that kind of replicate what we do, adapt it to their context, and learn hopefully from the mistakes that we made, and maybe also from what we do correctly. And so yeah, we need around 1,500 active members to be financially sustainable in the location where we are now. So I think that's the next big goal for us, where we focus on, also in order to open one more day, because for now we're closed on Tuesdays still. So with more members, with more working time from the members, we're also then it's possible to open more days, but also more working groups. So for example, in the food co-op in New York, we see that with more members coming, and they have around 17,000 members, so it's huge. And of course, it's like a lot of working time, but members write their own newspaper, they run their own soup kitchen, they make their own compost. So it's really like a neighborhood, like neighborhood activities beyond the work at the cashier in the supermarket. And that would be great to come to this point that also like a lot of this other work around can be done, like a lot of education work, helping on the field with our suppliers. And yeah, so there are lots of ideas to make use of that.
Fantastic. And it seems like you're well on the way to having those 1,500 active members.
If you know people in Berlin, tell them.
Tell them to go. Great. I love this idea of collaboration as well, that it's not all about just getting bigger for the sake of getting bigger, but actually, is there an opportunity to work with partners to take up some of that demand and help to scale that innovation in a collaborative way? That's really great. We've got a few minutes left now, so I see there's some conversation going on in chat, which is great. I'll come back to a couple of those questions, but I'm just going to hand over to Florence. I see Florence has got a hand up. So do you want to jump on in there, Florence?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to follow up on what Charlotte was saying. I think this whole issue of government support is important, but when we support government, we need to make a difference between different levels of government, and the role of cities and local governments is increasingly visible. And I think that if we want to transform food system, doing it at a territorial level or at a metropolitan level is absolutely key. So it would be, and I assume many of the innovators are already in contact in the city where they work with the people looking at food systems issue, because I think it's only by connecting in those areas with the institutional government system and changing, adapting the legislation that we can actually make a difference. So Copenhagen is a great example of a city where there's so much happening, but we're not always sure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And we really need to put the local governments responsible for facilitating synergy and supporting joint action by these different actors. Thank you.
Thanks, Florence. Yeah, really important points there, the sort of the wider support systems that are needed to make sure that these innovations are successful. I see there's a question there from Stephanie in the chat, going back to this question of scaling when it comes to innovations. And her question is it up to the innovators to go bigger, or is it about more innovators popping up in the same area? And Johanna touched on this as well. Did you want to add to that, Stephanie, at all?
No, I mean, yes, it's over to everyone really, the room. Like what, you know, we wanted to look at this as part of this workshop, really, this idea of scaling up and how do you do that? And it feels like every initiative is working hard, and at the moment it's just about, you know, breaking even. Scaling up feels like a whole other journey. So how can we start that journey? And should the focus be on individuals or unique instances doing the work to scale up, or should there be support for like replication? You know, where should that energy of scaling up go? And that's really to the board. I mean, maybe this is Metro have an idea on that, because they look at scaling up as part of their innovation theory.
Yeah, thank you. I think indeed in the examples we gather here, and also the co-op example, is still very much a socially oriented innovation. And I think the strength of these socially oriented ones is that the networking, if operating well, offers a certain type of long-term perspective, which is more independent from economic crisis or fluctuations in terms of product sales, but is relying on the internal forces of these socially organized cooperations. So I think that's kind of, if you want, so the oil which makes the FoodSHIFT, the food system running and going. We see that some of the upscaling activities and then we would have, of course, need to consult the experiences like people like Karen or others who just are in the midst of this process, do also bear some risks. That simply is a fact. You see that some even of the really big companies like Oatly enter a major economic financial crisis after some years, where you would think, well, this is running perfectly, but it also is entering a very vulnerable world of market rules and dependencies, which are hard to just counter with just goodwill, but where all kinds of interactions and support from economic sectors and from banks is important. Speaking about banks, I just would like to refer to a food initiative here in Tilburg. It's quite interesting. There is a local food system meeting always once a month, and it's propelled or at least financially supported by a Dutch bank, which is known for its commitment to sustainable goal setting in food. And so I think I can, from that experience, encourage to involve in these stages also the local economic sector, and not to shy away from this, because there is a win-win situation for both. In the case of the Dutch bank, they are looking for opportunities to basically put financial investment to the right place, and they see themselves also as an observer, not only as a volunteer or a partner like everybody else. And at the same time, they support this with some space and facilitation money, but that's not much. But it's important for these meetings, obviously. And at the same time, you are in touch a little bit with this perspective. And it's another type of support than a governmental subsidy. And we know from our trip to France, and when we visited local and vocal, and we visited also the Supermarché Solidaire, that this stakeholder or this innovator did not want state support explicitly because of the type of dependency which eventually grows. And he says, I'm not asking the state or the government for money, because if there is all of a sudden a change in the political system, I'm standing empty-handed. So he wants to rely on the market forces and his network. So these are all things, I think, one which points at some kind of flexibility and dynamic approach in setting all these things up.
Thanks, Dirk. Very interesting indeed. Apologies, we're just running ever so slightly over. We're just a few minutes over now, so I'm going to have to round up the conversation now. Really fascinating conversation with you all today. Great stuff. Really lots of insightful, inspiring things to take away. I hope you all feel the same. I'm just going to pass over to Sophia just to round up, let you know what's going to happen next, and to say goodbyes.
Thank you, Callum. Really interesting conversation. Apologies for slightly running over, but you're still here. I think as me, you're finding this really interesting. So next step, we'll produce a blog that will try and encapsulate a bit of the discussion today and the presentations and the many links that were shared in the chat. So thank you for that. And everyone that registered will receive a link to that blog when it's online. But to know about future workshops and events from the FoodSHIFT world, please do sign up to the Rise Up list. The instructions are in the chat. And finally, a very big thank you to our speakers today from Susmetro, Dirk, Poppy, to our innovators today, Joanna, Charlotte. Thank you so much for providing the inspiration. And Callum, thank you for the excellent facilitation as ever. And see you all soon.
I mean, thanks everybody. Great to see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
And I'll trust there with our